We have three more speakers. And our next speaker doesn't need much of an introduction because many of you have met Jim Waddell before here at Superpod or come here in the San Juan Islands. Jim is the founder of Dam Sense. He's a civil engineer, formerly with the Army Corps of Engineers, and he's a public utility commissioner. So welcome, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. It's great to be back here. I've done this a couple of times, and it's always fun to come to this group, which I think you guys have made a huge difference in the effort to recover salmon, recover orca, and get this Snake River dams reached. And so, I really appreciate that. You're the strongest community here. The dams and what's going on. Maybe even have a little pop test at the end. Now, does everybody understand or know about the lower Snake River dams in eastern Washington and what role they play in salmon?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not going to do a salmon discussion so much today or an orca discussion because I know other people will be covering that. Okay, so yes, I started Dam Sense about 10 years ago, an informal group. It was then incorporated about 4 or 5 years ago, and so we've been mostly volunteers, some key people, sharing grace from the island here. And we also had Chris Penny back there from the Army Corps of Engineers. He was their senior biologist in Walla Walla that I worked with. Raise your hand, Chris. So. And we've done it quite a few. And what Dam Sense has been all about, we're not so much an activist organization, we're an educational and research nonprofit. And so what we've done is synthesize thousands of pages of government documents and put them into either letters or reports and stuff. And a lot of that stuff is on our website at damsense.org. But there's just a ton more additional data. Millions of dollars worth of effort have gone into this. And hopefully we can, make it, hopefully it'll come to you, it'll pay out. Work. All right, let me get started here. And first I want to recognize Ken Balcom, who, I met over here many years ago. And what was interesting is he and his folks had independently come to the same conclusion about the lower Snake dams being the problem for killing salmon that the orcas need. And the government documents supported that too, and we were seeing that, but it was great that he independently saw that. And Ken has been, he helped Dam Sense get started as a physical agent, and he also, once we got incorporated, he was on my board. And so he was an inspiration for us all. And of course, it meant we had a very powerful team with Ken and Chris and a handful of other people from the Corps of Engineers and others that aren't in government. We had a pretty powerful team, and so that was the good news. The bad news is that we did such good work that the pro-dam community started raking in millions of dollars to basically discredit any way they could, anything that I said or the group said or anything like that. So it's been an uphill battle. Okay, so, whoops, wrong way. You'll have to bear with me. I have, what do they call it, neuropathy in my fingers and feet from chemotherapy. So these are the 4 dams, and these are the culprits. These are the guys that are killing all the juvenile smolts and adults as well. And I want to, point out that these dams have 4 basic features: a powerhouse. Oops. Here we go. All right, can you go? Can you just give me the pointer? All right. Yeah, I know where it is. I just can't look. I can't feel with my fingers. Okay, so. Powerhouse, spillway, navigation lock, earth and berm. And so that's pretty much what we mean when we talk, that's what they're composed of. Now, this is an image that was prepared by the Army Corps of Engineers during the study that I worked on 20 years ago with them. And what it shows is what it will look like at this particular dam once the earthen berm is removed. And it's important to keep in mind that there's a confusion sometimes about terminology, whether we talk about removal, or dam breaching. And actually, this is called dam breaching is what this is, because all we're doing is breaching the earthen berm. The rest of the dam, all this stuff, will remain there forever. And it would be incredibly expensive to remove it. And a lot of the cost estimates that you hear, like billions of dollars, that's what they're talking about. Oh, we got to remove all that. No, you don't have to remove all that. This is the original channel, and it can facilitate natural flows for salmon passage. Now, some of the things that we hear, and this is what kind of the meat of the presentation is going to be about, and so, pay attention. We're going to have a little test at the end. And so, people say that they don't kill enough salmon, to make it worth breaching, when in fact they do. It's been known for decades and decades that they are killing salmon and that we cannot recover unless we breach the dams. And just one statistic here is by breaching, you quit killing about 10 million juvenile salmon a year. And so if you stop killing the ones that are already in the river, that means you get a return, for orca food, fishermen, and escapement back into the, Idaho where they, make their beds and so forth. You get a ton of fish out in the ocean. So this is the quickest, cheapest way by far to provide food for orcas. Okay. Now, you hear about the hydropower and how important that is and so forth, and that we'll have blackouts in Seattle if we breach the dams. That's simply not true. 95% of the electricity on an average basin is surplus. It's sold on the open market, and quite often it's sold as a loss. And so this is where the Snake River dams are particularly liable because they produce, their power is so limited because of river flows that their surplus is not there much anyway. As an example of the surplus, this is a cover slide that was used at least a dozen times summer before last while the Northwest Power and Conservation Council was putting together their 7th power plan. Now, the council is funded by ratepayers through BPA, and they're the best scientists in terms of modeling and so forth. And what they showed is that, what does that say? Surplus. And they kept pointing out that there's plenty of surplus, okay? But the politicians and the staff was saying that, the leaders there were saying, oh, well, we don't really think that's right. We think the models are not right. And these are the best models that anybody's ever come up with. But point is, they were admitting that there is surplus, but that word was just, that idea was just fought by the pro-dam people. And even today, they're saying that, oh no, we're going to have blackouts. They claimed years ago that we would have blackouts last year. We didn't have any blackouts because of power. We had blackouts because the power lines got hit by trees or something, but that's about it. So, okay, next point. Will cost billions of dollars. You've heard terms like, Congressman Simpson threw out plans, and Inslee and Murray and Cantwell came up with plans in the $10 to $27 billion range. $billion range. That's simply ludicrous. Those numbers have no basis whatsoever. The real numbers are closer to $700 billion, and that's based on the Corps of Engineers' own work 10 years or 20 years ago that I was involved with. And we updated, Chris Penny and some other guys from the Corps of Engineers updated those numbers, and we can breach and mitigate for farmers and so forth to the tune of about $700 million. That's well within the economic possibility of BPA or anybody else paying for this. In other words, it works out from a benefit standpoint. Congress, so here's another favorite myth. Congress must pass legislation to authorize breaching. You guys heard that? Not true. Highly inaccurate. The executive branch has all the fiduciary responsibility or the fiduciary responsibility to shut down any project that's not making economic sense or is causing irreparable damage to the environment like these dams are. So the Corps can do this. There's plenty of examples where they have done it. I did it when I was in the Corps of Engineers, and I helped develop the rationale as to why the Corps has the discretion many years ago when I was in the Corps headquarters. We also did a legal analysis on it. Some lawyers worked on this, and through that analysis, they came to the same conclusion. The Corps does have the authority. And so when you hear that, but what do they, you say something about that, and somebody say, well, you don't understand, you got to have congressional authority, and so what you should say back, say, well, this may sound a little trite, but it's true, say, well, the principles are embedded in the Constitution. Go look it up, and give them that line just to shut them up, because, it's just annoying, they say this stuff to shut you down, usually, in a loud voice and in a crowd to make it intimidate you, but don't. We've got to fight this one back, and I spent a lot of time on this one myself, and we know that that's the case, is that we can breach without the need of Congress. It's always nice to have support. And if Inslee or Murray or Cantwell were to call up the Corps and say, let's breach, the Corps would, listen to that. But they don't have to have any kind of authority or legislation. Okay, this is an interesting one. I've been working, the Dam Sense team has been working all three branches of government, the executive branch, the legislative, and the congressional side. And on this issue of, the courts, I filed an amicus brief with the help of some attorneys here a couple of years ago, and we told the judge, hey, all the government data shows that we need to breach these dams is the only way to get to recovery. To my surprise, in his decision, he actually addressed that. And so for amicus to be addressed is pretty good. But what he said was pretty telling. He says, hey, he didn't say it quite like that, but, sounded like a judge talking. But he said, I really can't do that. I can't order the Corps to do breaching because the plaintiffs have never asked me to tell them to breach. So after 25 years of litigation, millions of dollars of your money, donors' money, have gone into this on the legal side, and we still, as of today, not even, well, we knew a year ago, they had not asked for breaching. They've been asking for other stuff, like more spill over the dams to help the juveniles pass, and additional improvements on the fish bypass systems and stuff like that, which none of that stuff has worked. They've been asking for that, and on the principle that if they nibble away at the federal government long enough, the feds will cave. Well, no, I worked in DC for 12 years. That's not the way it works on something like this. If you want to delay the government, yeah, sure, nibble away, that annoys them and drags things out, that might work. But when you're trying to get a dam breach, and it has to be breached now, you want to say immediately, we want to breach this year, it can be done. So anyway, and of course, I'll talk more about this in the end, but we are in a interesting phase in the litigation. We're in a stay where the plaintiffs and the defendants have basically decided to negotiate. And I'll talk more about how that's coming along in a minute. Okay. Oops. Okay, they produce clean energy. We hear this all the time, right? Well, no, not really. They, of course, kill fish, but more relevant to the idea of cleanness is that they emit methane. Methane occurs when algae decomposes. The Snake River dams, because of the warm water and the nutrients flowing out of Idaho from farming, produce the perfect environment to produce a lot of algae, which produces a lot of methane. And in fact, over the next 10 years, the Snake River dams will produce enough methane that would be the equivalent of 3 natural gas power plants that we're shutting down because they emit carbon. But these reservoirs are emitting more than that in methane equivalents, okay? So that's another myth that we try to debunk. Oh, we need more studies. This is the favorite one. Core loves this. Everybody loves this. The consultants love this. We've created a huge industry out there of studying salmon recovery and so forth, orca recovery. $120 million as of a few years ago have been spent on these studies. And if you read the data, and I know this is tough because we're talking thousands of pages, but if you read the summaries we did, it shows the data in just about all cases, whether it's economics or biology or policy, whatever it is, it supports breaching. But nevertheless, that's ignored, and the conclusion is rendered that, oh, well, the dams are too important, and we need to keep them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Your report says they're not that important. They're losing money. The empirical generation data, which we have, shows they're losing money, but they ignore it. Okay, this is a view I wanted to show you of a place on the Snake River called Petawawa, and this was before the dams were built. And I think this is Brian Jones's orchard, his family orchard along the Snake River back here, and you can see it was a really vibrant agricultural little valley, Napa Valley kind of thing, and actually these are apple trees and so forth, and prior to Prohibition, this was all a lot of vineyards. And this is one of the original vineyard areas in Washington State. Well, this is what it looked like after they built the dams. Now, isn't that lovely? This is what the Corps of Engineers calls, great recreational areas. And yet, if you've ever been up on the Snake River, even in the summertime on a Saturday, you won't find but 2 or 3 boats out there. It's just a wasted resource. And so when you breach, you can have this back. We probably leave more riparian area for, to protect salmon habitat and so forth along here. But you're going to uncover and expose a beautiful valley, 140 miles of wonderful land that was a vibrant little community at that time. And we can do that, we can make that again, but that's not, people don't want to talk about that, but that's great stuff. Okay, where am I? Looks like all right, so let me make sure okay, so what do we do now? A little bit about the status. Like I said, we're in this litigation. So on the litigation side, we're in what they call a stay. And the feds and the plaintiffs have supposedly been arguing back and forth about what they're going to do. Now, the good news is that this is now being discussed, or has been for the last 6 months or so, at the executive level of the executive branch. In other words, Washington, D.C. This is where it needs to be, because in the Northwest, this decision will never be made. There's no politician, more than 1 or 2, that would even suggest breaching the dams in any kind of meaningful way. Even Congressman Simpson, he said, yeah, sure, but we're going to pay off people billions of dollars. Well, that's not going to work. But so this has to be, it has to be dealt with in Washington, D.C. So we have to focus our attention on Washington, D.C. with the White House, the Secretary of Energy, because that's where Bonneville Power Administration falls under, and Bonneville, gets the power. They pay the bills. Bonneville's going to pay all these bills for breaching, and so DOE has got to be a part of this, and of course the Secretary of the Army and a few others. And so but the bad news is, well, more good news, is that it's clear to everybody, most people that are inside this knowledge loop, that this is the best opportunity we've had for breaching in the last 20 years since the study I worked on back in 2000. We've people like you and all the other groups and the work we've done and so forth have elevated this. We've got it there. And that's great news. But the problem is, if the White House was to make a non-breach decision, oh heck, we're stuck with that. And it's going to be tough, a lot tougher, to unwind that and back that down if the president has come out and said, well, we're going to keep the dams, or we're going to study it for the next 20 years, or something like that. And so it's both good and bad news. And so it's really critical that we somehow get the ball across the goal line at this point. And essentially, to use the analogy, football, we're on the 10-yard line. We're down to the 2-minute clock. You know, we've got, you know, third down and, you know, 10 to go or something. And we're that close. And so we need everybody to pitch in over the next 30 to 45 days with calls and texts and so forth. And this is who we want to target, is the White House. And so you guys, you know, pull out your cell phones, either take a picture of this or type in the text number or the phone numbers over here on the right-hand side. And if you call the phone number, it's real simple. These nice people answer the phone. And I know some of you have done it, and just, you know, and tell it's usually a lady that, you know, hey, would you please tell the president that we need to breach the lower snake dams starting this year or immediately. And that's all you have to say. And we need to do that, though. We need to bombard them. And, you know, there's, in this room, you know, if this group right here was to start calling, and Sharon Grace and some folks here on the island got this Breaching Tuesdays, which every Tuesday they're trying to get people to call in. Well, where we are now, we need to change. We're going to expand that to Tuesday through Thursday. Call the White House in the morning or whatever while you're having a cup of coffee and just deliver that message. And if this many people, I worked in the White House, so I do know how they receive communications, and when it hits certain levels, you know, okay, we better pay attention to this and elevate it. A group like this, if they were texting 3 days a week for the next 3 or 4 weeks, that would rise above the fray and get into the consciousness of the John Podesta, who is in the White House, who is working this issue. And he's a pretty senior level guy, and so we're hoping to, this is what we really need to do, is get on him to go with breaching. Or you can send a text message, but, you know, let's do that. I mean, you know, I'm serious. This is it. If we can't make this happen now, it's the end of salmon recovery. I mean, we're really late now. You know, Chris will, you know, we worry about, are we too late? Well, you know, we like to believe that nature can find a way for these salmon and these orcas, but it really is, this is it. If we don't do it now, it's going to be a long time before we can ever muster enough talent. You know, I'm soon out of the picture with my health and everything, and they're just, you know, and Ken's gone now, so we're at a point now we got to do this, and if we don't, it's bad. And so what I please would encourage you folks to do is at least do this. And the other thing, we need influencers. This has been our greatest weakness, is we don't have people that know people in the White House that we can, you know, call our friend or whatever and say something about this. And so, you know, my guess is that in this room, there's at least a couple people that know somebody or that know somebody in either the White House or Secretary of Energy's office or the Corps of Engineers or something. But we really need to, you know, use those connections. And if you do have one, you can call me. I do a pointer.
It's the Jim. Here you go, Jim. What's up, Jim? It's Major.
Oh, she's already changed it. Well, we got a little elf working here. This is Heather over here. So that's my phone number. So if you think you've got somebody that you can call or contact that, you know, is up there in the stratosphere of the executive branch, let me know and we'll work something out. We'll see if we can, you know, take your contact information and the 3 of us or 4 of us or whatever get on the phone and so forth and try to make something happen. And And otherwise, that's pretty much it. Now, and I do want to introduce Heather over here. I think most of you know Heather Nichols. She's here on the island. She's been really, really critical to the effort in the last 5 years. She's donated thousands of hours of her time. And, I would be, in deep trouble if I hadn't had Heather over the last 3 years, particularly the last year since I've been undergoing treatment. So that's kind of where we're at now. So we'll take I think I have time for a couple questions, and how much time? And I thought I was 5 minutes. Okay, all right. Quiz time. And you just yell out, okay? Do we need congressional authorization to breach the dams? No. Very good. And what are you going to tell some bozo that tells you that? It's in the Constitution. Look it up, smarty. Okay. Here's one more. If you breach the dams, roughly how many juvenile salmon survive to go back out in the ocean? And yeah, well, 10 million survive, and some of those will die down on the Columbia River, but a big, huge chunk of those go down, feed orcas, feed fishermen, support the biosystem, the food web out in the ocean, and still have plenty left to come back in and reproduce. Okay, let's take any questions before I do any more test stuff. Yeah. Can you speak a little louder?
I would reiterate, you said he's going to make a decision on what the next 35 days, when's the deadline for this campaign to be on?
What do you call this campaign?
You said the executive branch is going to make a decision in the next, 35 days? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so when's the cutoff? What day?
Oh, it looks like it's 31 August is they have to make the decision by. That's when the stay ends. They could ask for an extension or something, but they've already done it a couple times. We know they're working on it. I'm sort of inside the process, and I can't talk a lot about it, but it's interesting. They are stuck. They have been wrestling with this now for 6 months, and other areas they've already issued opinions and decisions on, but on the Snake River dams they haven't. And so we know that it's got their attention. It's I don't know whether to call it galling them or what, but they're messing with this. This is why the calls are so important. Okay, Tuesday through Thursday is what we want to expand this to, just to give them a hard hit over the next 40 days. What? Wait, I got this one up here. Go ahead.
Specific text that you would like us to use to get the message out, so we're coming across with the United message.
Well, I don't have one written up here, but it's really simple. Just the question. Oh, you got one, Sharon?
I've got one, yes. Breach the
Sharon Grace
dams
here.
this year, immediately, no more stays, no more studies.
Do you guys hear that?
Yes.
Breach immediately, no more studies, no more stays. Go for it. One other side note, I was introduced as a PUD commissioner, and I was elected about 4.5 years ago. And part of my campaign was talking about breaching the Snake River dams over in Clallam County, because those dams are affecting our fisheries, okay, big time, not in addition to the power. And lo and behold, I got elected. And so I had a really ugly panel or board with the other two members, but that all changed back in January. In March, we were able to pass a resolution, my PUD, to support breaching the lower Snake dams. And so no one has ever done that with utility business. Thank you. Okay, you have a question?
Yes, where does the governor of Washington stand on this? And is he gonna help?
Where does the governor Inslee stand on this? Well, he's been really wishy-washy, middle of the fence. The Orca Task Force, he kept making promises, but he didn't want to go for dam breaching. And he's still that way. And, you know, it's unfortunate. I mean, he's not in the chain of command for this. In other words, this is an executive branch, but it sure would help if Inslee would be supportive. So when the Corps of Engineers or the White House makes this decision, they know that there's some political, maybe not support, but at least not backlash. And that's what Obama was facing when he was hit with this. When he was president, you know, Sharon and Gary Weiss and some others are working on this. You know, he wanted some guarantee that there wasn't going to be backlash from the Democrats. We never got it. The environmental groups wouldn't help us with that. And it, you know, I mean, the ones that are, you know, the salmon people were, you know, this just wasn't their agenda. So we, you know. Okay, any other questions? I guess I can wrap it up unless there's one more. I got to take one more.
What sort of costs are going to be imposed on the farming?
What is the
What sort of costs
cost?
are going to be imposed on the farming?
That's not somebody coughed. Is it, what kind of costs are imposed on
The farming.
the farming community? Virtually none. We hear that they're going to run farmers out of business to the tune of 100,000 or something. That's all baloney. There are two types of farmers that benefit from the Snake River dams. Irrigation farmers on one of the 4 reservoirs at Ice Harbor. Those are mostly, there's like 14 or 15 farmers. They're mostly corporate farmers. Half of them are from a foreign country. And so, you know, they're clamoring about, you know, they want to get paid off to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. But no, you don't need to do that. All you need to do is when the reservoir goes down is you extend their pipes, put additional pumps on there, and they're all set. So you can take care of those guys. The shipping of wheat on the river is easy to take care of too, because the grain elevators along the river are also along a railroad that's been modified and upgraded over the last 20 years. So it's just simply a matter of moving the grain conveyance from barge to rail. And with, you know, and I've got some money in the estimate there to improve those rail sidings for capacity. And so you can ship all the grain. The farmer doesn't change. In other words, he takes his wheat to the same place he's always taken it. So all this stuff about millions or 100,000 trucks is just crazy. It's made up.
So we just need to tell Biden that we need more trains. That should work.
So we need to tell Biden what?
That we need more trains. We need more rail infrastructure. He should like that.
Well, yeah, yeah, you should, but the truth is we really don't. I mean, the good news is nobody knows. This is crazy. People ignore the fact that there's a upgraded rail line that's being used right now, but not at capacity. And all you got to do is throw in a couple more locomotives and some more wheat cars, and you're there. Okay, I guess I should wrap it up at this point. Okay, one more. Oh,
I just sent the text to that number, and I think we all could do that right now. That would be the best.
yeah, let's do it. You know, take your phones out and let's get busy. Let's get started on this. Let them know we're here.
Woohoo! And you get a reply from Biden.
It's right here. Number's right here. 302-404-0880.
And it says he's excited to hear from you. It's true.
But anyway, let's do this. This group could make the difference. Okay, and Sharon's got people going already, but if we could multiply it across this group and get your friends or your husband or spouse or whatever friend to go along with you, because I can tell you from working in the White House, if they were to get over the course of several weeks, several hundred texts or voicemails or messages, you know, every day, that would rise up to the chief of staff, and they'd go in and say, hey, you know, we've got a lot of people. Because, you know, they run the algorithms on this stuff, and they know that for every person that calls in, it represents another 20 that wouldn't, you know, don't want to bother, but they're for that. And so whatever they're calling it about. So it's about the only thing we've got left to do given the time. And then if it doesn't pass, well, I don't know. It's somebody else. Heather can take over and plug it away.
I have a quick question. What will happen, so August 31st is the end of the stay, the court stay, and if they don't come out with something to breach, what's gonna ensue following?
That's a good question. If they come out with a non-breach decision, what will happen? Well, We don't know what Earth Justice, the lawyers for the environmental groups, would do. But because, and you know, Sharon is here, you know, she's an attorney, but because it was mediation, it's basically a done deal. I mean, you know, it's hard to go back on that. That if the decision is to keep the dams.
My fear is the decision will be to breach. First, we spread money all over, and then in 10 or 20 years we breach, but it's never going to happen because the money will be spread all over, and that, you know, the farmers and everybody's got what they want. So that's why breaching has to happen before the money's spread around. And if breaching happens, the farmers will scream and yell, and Cantwell and Murray will run to their rescue and get them whatever appropriations they want. So that's how it has to happen.
Yeah.
And it should be put in a settlement, because you can't, it's very difficult to appeal a settlement.
And that was the point of the question that Heather had, and yes.
Yeah. It's just very difficult to appeal that.
And again, though, all this money is not, and I just talked to a senior official in the Corps of Engineers, and he told me, he says, he talked to the guy that claims to have put those numbers together, the 10 to 27 billion, and this Corps guy says he knows that's wrong. That's all baloney. There's no substance behind it. And it's just meant to pacify the farmers and other people. And it would, who knows where that money would come from, but breaching and mitigation that's been defined by the Corps, we've refined it, is got to be repaid by bondable power administration. That's ratepayer money. And that's a good thing, actually, because if you had to get appropriated funds from Congress, you'd never get it. Not for breaching. You might get it for some of these other things. But
some other somewhat good news is we do have information that a couple of people have talked directly to Podesta. But the other side has people walking in all day long. So,
yeah.
But we do have a couple of people who have talked to him.
Yeah, we're getting overwhelmed by millions of dollars worth of propaganda from nonprofits. Okay, last question.
Have any of the farmers been willing to meet with you or talk and learn about the available science, or is there pushback not on having a conversation?
Well, you know, meeting with farmers is always a challenge, but we certainly, the guy that had that orchard up there, we've met with him many times over the years, and he's for breaching, but he's reluctant to say too much because, you know, it's like anybody who brings up breaching over in Eastern Washington, they call you a communist or something. And so it's difficult. And I've talked to a few others that are in the agricultural business and, you know, and kind of pinned them down. I said, well, who's really getting harmed here? Well, this, you know, because we keep hearing about these farmers. Well, which farmers? And when you pin them down, they don't have good answers. I mean, the Corps of Engineers identified the farmers by name. We updated that information with a study that Sharon got some of your ORCA money for and validated who those owners were. And the great old Broads did it again not too many months ago and validated who those farmers were, and it's not very many. And they're corporate guys. And so I don't have the bandwidth to go chase them down, but, you know. That's it. Okay, I'm going to wrap up, and I appreciate your attention. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And can we just get a round of applause here for everybody that's going to text for the next 3 weeks or call or write for the White House? And then can you also tell if you're going to ask somebody in your network to do the same?